Hey folks, this is Tim and Kimberly with Hope Rescue at Hope Rescue Podcast. We're glad to have you with us, and we're going to talk about an amazing thing. But before we do, I want to say, hey Kimberly, I love you.
Aw, I love you. Hey, that reminds me.
What do you say when somebody says I love you?
Well, hopefully there's no like blank space there and here's what I was going to say. Do you remember the first time you said that you loved me? What I said to you?
Didn't say anything.
No,
That's
I
nice.
did. I said, feed my sheep.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you said, if you love me, feed my sheep.
Yeah.
Which is a Bible reference to John 21.
Right.
Where Jesus said that to Peter. So you were seeing
If you love me,
Peter.
feed my sheep.
That's pretty funny because she had 5 kids.
I know.
And I've been feeding them
and
ever since.
I was waiting to tell you I loved you.
Yeah. You wouldn't tell me.
I was waiting for a few things. I was waiting for the some certain actions to commit to the love.
Don't just say it. See what you got.
No, because I knew I loved you. I just had been through so much. A lot of people will understand this as we unpack today's podcast, that there's so many reasons why we don't say the words. And for me, and like you, we had come from out of a very broken relationship and we're in the process of healing, but there's still those places of your heart that you don't realize are unhealed until you're in a moment like that, where you're in self-protection, right?
Right. Well,
for me,
I get it.
We were fast and
farther in the game.
Hot and heavy right from the get-go.
Well, let's not say that.
Well, it was true. The chemistry was, you could cut it with a knife.
But hot and heavy means some things.
But no, what I was going to say is we had a very unique experience in that when we met on our blind date, for whatever reason, God placed in both of our hearts, immediately we knew we were for each other. Yeah. And it was to the point where we actually had a ring within 18 days. Now, we don't recommend this for anybody.
You're telling us.
But I knew I had the beginnings of love in my heart for you, but I knew more that there was something supernatural going on.
Here's the problem. So I say I love you, you say feed my sheep. Okay, I get that. But then you said, if you really love me, I want a ring within 20 days.
No, I never said anything like that.
Oh, you didn't say that?
No, that was in your head. You're like, I got to lock this one down.
I wasn't a young buck, so I had to go for it. Anyway, this concept of saying I love you, we love people, but do you tell them you love them? Mm-hmm. And why do some people find that a hard thing to say? We're on a series right now. This is the 4th one. The first one was I'm sorry, kind of hard to say. Mm-hmm. Another thing is tell me more. In other words, I want to hear what you have to say. We talked about active listening and how important that is. Mm-hmm. And then, setting boundaries by saying no. Mm-hmm. It is really hard when you care about people in your life. And even if you don't, you may just have a hard time saying no.
But it's also very loving to set boundaries.
Well, it's good for the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also to say, so today we're talking about why, for some people, it's hard to say, I love you. Hard to say, I love you. In American vernacular, I've noticed that we were just talking about this with our daughter, but in the American vernacular, you say, I love you, but if a person says love you,
that's
there's
different.
A big difference between love you and I love you. Like you might say to one of your friends, love you. Uh-huh. But it doesn't have the intimacy of I love you. I don't even know why that is. I just know that to be true.
It is absolutely true. Yes. Yeah. And I think that if it is a heart and soul friend, which I have a couple of those, I regularly say I love you in text or whatever, but you can say love you and it's just they already know they're loved. If it's a relationship that doesn't have that depth and breadth of time, and you say love you, that feels a little less. It's very superficial. It can tend to feel that way. But if you, it's how you say it.
Yeah.
That matters.
Yeah, putting the I in there is a big deal. Like I remember, I was dating this woman, obviously before I met you, but I was dating this woman.
Trash. Sorry.
Garbage. And I said, she had done something really nice, and I said, oh, wow, love you. And that was kind of maybe instead of saying thank you, I don't know why I said it, but I just said it. And then I kind of, after I said it, she goes, "I love you." And I went, "No, I said love you. And you said, I love you. You know I'm never going to see you again, right?
Oh,
this is over.
burn.
This is because I don't love you. We just met."
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's sort of like a, "Okay, love you, bye."
Yeah, that's like, wow, awkward. But there, it's really, really important to understand what you mean when you say "I love you."
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about some of the ways that people deal with that. But do you say, "I love my car"? I had a little wrapper. Kimberly will not let trash be sitting on but I had a little wrapper here I was going to use as a prop. It's a candy bar. Well, it's not a candy bar. We'll call it
Protein
a protein bar.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of a candy bar.
It is a protein
bar.
bar.
But anyway, it says on there that it has peanut butter and dark chocolate, which I've never really liked dark chocolate. I like milk chocolate better. And then it says on there with quinoa. I'm like, no. I don't want quinoa.
Quinoa's the main source of
in
protein.
my candy, But anyway, so it's my favorite. And
Well, you went into that situation kicking and screaming because I was like, grab one of the new protein bars I got. They're kept in the fridge because they can't sit out. They're fresh. And so you grabbed it and you're like, "Oh no, where's my other ones?" Because we were attached to a certain type.
Right.
And so you took it because reluctantly.
Yeah.
And then ultimately ended up being your best thing ever.
I don't even know what they cost, but whatever it is,
It's
it's
some
worth
whole
every
meal.
dime. It's just, and it's probably way too many calories. But anyway, I will say oftentimes when I eat that after my workout, because it's health food.
Right.
And it's
Peanut
organic.
butter and chocolate.
It says it's fully organic. You have
It
to put
is.
it in the refrigerator. It'll
Yes.
melt. Anyway, so when I'm eating, I love this candy bar. And like, do you love it? Like you love me?
Yeah.
But, when we were kids, this really dates me. Maybe Gen Xers did this too. You can tell us. But like little kids, you'd say, "Man, I love this," and they go, "Well, why don't you marry it?" Did you say
I think
that
it's
Gen
still
X
a
thing?
thing, yes.
Yeah, maybe a little. Well, then marry it. Okay, that was the.
I will marry dark chocolate and peanut butter. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
Yeah,
And I will stay in that commitment for the rest of my life.
So, how do we deal with love, and how do we deal with statements of love, and so forth? And there are different things that we do.
Right. And the key is because it's used flippantly at times, it can be considered contrived speech.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous because your mouth will eventually betray your heart. If you're saying something to someone like, "I love you" or "love you," and you don't mean it, your actions, your mouth, your behavior will ultimately betray that.
You can't fake that forever.
You can't
You
fake
can
that
fake
forever.
it for a
Right.
while and manipulate people.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's a lot of people that do that.
Yeah. And contrived speech is basically lacking in genuineness, as we know. When your expression of love lacks truth, eventually it's going to be revealed in your actions and your behavior. It can't sustain the test of time.
Yeah. And when you truly love somebody, think about this. And you may not be great at expressing it, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but you may not be great at expressing that statement of love, but you're really good at showing it.
Yeah.
And I think that is
Powerful.
I do think you need to say it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about is hard things to say.
Right. It's used oftentimes as a tool for manipulation too, which you have to be careful of, telling people you love them when you don't really want, you're not backing it up with your behavior and your actions. There's a term out there, we hear it a lot, called love bombing. And that's very classic behavior in dealing with the narcissist, but also just, people who have their selfish intentions that are driving their motives. And love bombing is usually a part of relationship abuse, where you come in hot and heavy with words, everything that person needs to hear, with gifts, with adulation, and building someone up on this pedestal, only to basically have your motivation is to eventually pull that out from under them and have them under your control. And so you get into this cycle of almost addiction for the person that is the victim, where they are in this pattern of being love bombed, and then it's withdrawn. So there's this devaluing that happens and taking away from who they are, and then the love bombing will come back in at just the right time. So that's how women and men stay in cycles of abuse. Is there's this almost a psychological addiction to this crazy roller coaster ride.
Yeah, we talked about our first hard saying is "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
But manipulators, abusers use love bombing and fake sorrow to manipulate their relationship.
Yeah.
And it keeps people stuck. Well, he apologized, so he may be, he may do terrible things to me, but
Right.
he does feel, and he tells me he loves me, and he feels bad when he does these bad things. And you feel this kind of almost obligation to stay in there.
Right.
So
Even though the behavior and the actions after that empty apology don't back it up, it still keeps you, and I'm speaking from my own experience in my first marriage, it still keeps you bound in this relationship because the words that they're saying are correct, but the actions and the behavior aren't following it. Love is, in its definition, selfless.
Yeah, before we get in, we're going to talk about the reasons why people don't say I love you. And there are probably, you could come up with a list as well, but we came up with a few things that we think might be helpful for our discussion for this podcast. But before we get into that, I was thinking, maybe a good definition of love is in order. So when you say I love you and you don't love a person, we already said that can be a really dangerous thing. But what does love mean? And years ago, I heard this definition about love, that it's a mental attitude of submission for the needs of another person. And think about that. It's not an emotion. And yes, it does result in action, but it's not an action. It's a mental attitude. So it results in emotion, it results in action, but it drives these, but it's not at the very source. So even when someone is acting irresponsibly, you can love them. In fact, different kinds of love. To have personal, romantic love, you have to have a relationship. It has to be reciprocal. But to love people that you maybe don't even know, and in some ways, and actually in real ways, tangible way, right now, we're loving you, even though we don't know who you are as a listener. We know many of our listeners, but we don't know all of them. And so we may not know you, but in a sense, we're submitting to your need. We have prepared to put together some information that may help your life. And that's why we do this podcast. And so in a real tangible sense, we're loving you.
It's serving. It's the selfless serving to build others up beside yourself. It's actually stepping out of yourself to raise up somebody else. That's your needs and wants. That's the ultimate example in Scripture is God laid down His life, for us. Jesus.
For God, it's interesting if you see this in Scripture. For God so loved the world that He gave. Right. Husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave.
Right.
So there's always this giving. But that's not the core. The core is, I've got a purpose, I've got a mission. My mission is to love.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for us to do that.
Yeah.
And in a real sense, love is a choice. And you say, well, I don't love my spouse right now. Well, maybe you don't feel it, but you can choose to love your spouse even though you don't feel it. And that's not hypocritical.
Right.
Because we've been called to love.
Right.
And you may not feel like you love the Lord right now, but we are
called
and we choose to love Him. That's our calling. We are to love God with all of our heart.
Right.
And it needs to be intentional. So we'll kind of get into that. But here are some reasons why people don't say I love you.
We tossed around some ideas about this, but I would say the first reason why folks don't say I love you would probably be vulnerability, because I think depending on your cultural background or the family of origin you come from, or prior relationships you've been in, it can make you feel somewhat weak and it puts you at a vulnerable deficit. Like you're in tender territory, because it almost is like you're I don't know, you're vulnerable, you're open, you're to be wounded, you're prepared to be like, rejected.
Yeah, about 20 years into counseling couples, giving spiritual advice and so forth. I'm not a therapist, but giving, excuse me, giving spiritual advice to couples and helping to improve the quality of their relationship, I began to notice something, and it's really self-evident, but I didn't pick it up until probably 20 years in, and that is the person in a relationship who loves the least has the most power. Mm-hmm. Because think about that. Think about if I don't love you as much as you love me, it makes you vulnerable to me. And I don't care as much. So, if I don't love you, I don't care as much. So in a sense, the person that loves the most has the most power because they're fulfilling their God-given calling. But in a relationship sense, in a negotiation of authority and power and vulnerability, when I don't care, you can't hurt me.
Yeah.
So that's the
a good
problem.
point.
And
yeah.
when you begin to crush your friends or your spouse or a romantic interest, when you begin to crush their heart, you do great damage to your relationship. Mm-hmm. You're not doing just damage to them. You're doing damage to your relationship. Mm-hmm. And it's going to pay out in very negative ways. It's important to cultivate love and to love well. Anyway, the second one, so vulnerability is number one. Number two would be lack of sensitivity. I think some of the reasons why people don't say I love you is because they're just not sensitive. And when I say that, what we're meaning is they don't have the empathy. Mm-hmm. They don't have sympathy for the other person. They're not looking at what does it mean to someone to say I love you. In a few minutes, we're going to talk about families that don't say I love you and why they don't. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of a weird thing, but at least in my culture.
Right.
My parents said it not nearly as much as we say it to our children and as much as we say it to each other, but they said it to each other quite a bit. And I think I got enough of it when I was growing up. I heard it enough from my mom and dad.
Yeah, that wasn't my experience. My parents always said how much they loved us and how much they loved each other.
Yeah, your dad was
very affectionate. Yeah, which I'm grateful for that. The third reason is, you want to be genuine. And because we said people use this statement to manipulate, it can be viewed as insincere. And like, what do you want on the back end of this, you know? Yeah. So they'll withhold it for that reason. And I think that it's just really important to remember that love is a choice, and even using terms of endearment and love is a choice. Even when the feelings don't necessarily back it up, the behavior, it's important to walk it out, and our feelings can't drive our life. Right. We've had lots of tough days, and we've joked in the past about how even on podcast days, we, for whatever reason, we tend to there's a tension around it because he's juggling a full-time job, and we take our day off. And so, our rest of our day, we try to have a date out of it or whatever, but there's tension around that. But the behavior and the action of love says, I'm committed to you. I love you, and it's so important to say those words, even when you're not necessarily feeling it.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me.
And Tim's been fighting a cold, as you can hear.
She loves me in spite of my cold. She won't kiss me, but
I give you plenty of kisses. Yeah.
Another reason why people don't say "I love you," those three words, and it seems strange to me that people have a hard time saying it, because our family. My sons say it to me every day. They say it to each other. They say it. I mean, it's really cultivated. Yeah. I think Kimberly has had a big impact on all of us on that, but also influence like Cassie is very intentional. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She's our daughter-in-law, married to our oldest son.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a neat
Say the words.
dynamic.
Say the words.
It's always.
Yeah.
And I would never have a day if something happened to me. I don't think my kids would think, "Oh, I wish I had said I love you," because they did the last time I saw them.
Yeah,
I get
every time.
every single one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I go to the gym, and nobody says it there, but I get it here when I leave. Anyway, so one of the reasons why is because of family of origin, as Kimberly mentioned, or I'm going to share about a cultural barrier. And I don't mean this to be in any way negative towards this culture, but in researching why people don't say I love you. And I thought, I do know some cultures are a little stiffer. Some European cultures are a little stiffer. Some Asian cultures are. And I think in this melting pot of America, it's said quite a bit. I know I have a lot of Mexican friends. They say it all the time. There are, French say it all the time, but they do say it differently there different than what you would think. They, instead of saying I love you, they say kisses. And that's romantic love. And so when you love your wife or your husband, you say kisses. Now, I don't know if that's across the board. I read that, so I don't know if that's true or not, but some French guy wrote it. But what I found was this. I was doing some research on this, and excuse me, and I heard this from Business Insider said, Chinese males don't usually say, I love you to family members. And there are some family members who have never heard their dad say to them, children, never heard their dad say to them, I love you. But they never question their dad's love.
Right.
So that's an interesting dynamic. In fact, the article says children rarely say I love you to their parents, nor do parents say this to their children. The article says, quote, I have never said I love you to my family, and I don't think I will in the future. One 56-year-old told the paper. And saying it out loud is embarrassing for me. This is in this Chinese culture. Now, I've been to China a couple times. Everybody I met there were Christians. There was a lot of expressions of love, and so I don't know how it goes in the culture, but all I know is from what I've done in this little bit of research, it's not just not saying I love you, or let me rephrase that. They may not say I love you, but they show that they love them. Like, for example, one young woman who's never heard her father, Chinese woman, never heard her father say, I love you, for her birthday, had a photo album made. And it was all of their times together.
Oh, sweet.
It was, she said, I've never questioned my dad's love.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, we are not saying I love you is the most important thing to say, but it is hard to say that in our culture, in the American culture, kind of this melting pot that we are. I think that it's said more often than some. And then in some languages, and this is what I learned about the French, they use the word like and love interchangeably. And we do too, we do too in our culture. But when they use it interchangeably, they might say, like I was saying, I love this candy bar or this protein bar, or they might say, I love this woman, or I love this baguette, and the same thing. But that's why they use terms like kisses, and that express more of a romantic feeling for someone. So, there are some of those barriers, and we're not saying you have to change your culture and so forth, but we are saying that it is an important word to say, but some people have a hard time saying it.
Another reason why is our fifth, and that's fear. And that resonates for a lot of people. Fear of non-reciprocation, which is the worst, like it's going to, you put it out there and then it's just like silence, you know? Or, fear of rejection. Like they don't feel that way. They are rejecting you. It's not that maybe they don't feel like in our case, I felt love for you and I didn't say it back just because I was in self-protection mode. But there's people who who have fear of rejection, so they don't want to, they don't want that rejection, the fear over timing, like you got to have like this perfect moment to say, I love you, and it's become such a big deal that like, how do I say it? And, you're almost overthinking it. A fear of being abused again, like I was, a previous relationship that's made me uncomfortable with the vulnerability because you put your whole heart, and in my case, your kids at risk, just because the word had been emptied of meaning. There was nothing to back up that word of love, for 13 years in a toxic marriage where I was being cheated on constantly. So I think I had that self-protection mode on. And so that's a valid reason is, there's fear of saying it. It's not a reason to keep you from doing it, but it's understandable.
Yeah. When you feel love and you feel it so strongly, there may still be this one barrier, and the final one is a lack of self-worth. Mm-hmm. You don't feel worthy of love. Yeah. And so it keeps you from saying, I love you, in case it's not reciprocated.
You can't give away what you don't have.
Yeah.
True. For your own self.
But think about, you may love somebody really strongly, but you're concerned about the reciprocation. But I want to say this, that the most important words that were left by God for us, directives, are found in Deuteronomy 6, and you hear it over. Jesus said it. The greatest commandment is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and might, and love your neighbor as yourself.
That's good.
And that is a choice. We choose to love God. But the way that the book of Deuteronomy shared it, and Orthodox Jews and other forms of religious Jews actually will take these and they put it as phylacteries around their hands, or as a phylactery between their eyes, just as a matter during their prayers, to remind them this statement. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. And the words that I command you today shall be on your heart. And then he goes into how to express it to your children and how to remember it on a daily basis. It's so important. And then love your neighbor as yourself. Well, there's a lot more we could talk about on that. But here's some reasons why I think it's important to say I love you. It is important to hear it, and it's important to express it. And let's get past the barrier so we can express these things to each other. Next week, we're going to move on in our statements that are hard to say. We're going to talk about I need help. So hope you'll listen then. You've been listening to Hope Rescue Podcast at hoperescuepodcast.org.
Bye, guys.